Well, thank you for tuning in to the Church History Trail, and as you can see, we're still in MOIRA, County Down, and there's a great volume of traffic trying to get into MOIRA. But we're actually standing outside St John's Parish Church, and it's up there on the hill, believe it or believe it not, but you can't really see it because of the fog. I'll just zoom in on the board there and let you see the board. And there you can see St John's Parish Church. And so we're going to take a wee walk up to the church itself. You see, in July 1756, John Wesley paid his first visit of many visits actually to MOIRA. And Anne Luton wrote in 1882 that one day in the year 1756, the Earl of MOIRA sent a servant to the clergyman to request the key of the church so that the Reverend John Wesley might preach to the people. And the clergyman declined in giving the key. And so the Earl was greatly annoyed at the rector's refusal, but he was determined that nothing should prevent Mr. Wesley from preaching. So he sent the bellman through the town to summon all the people to the lawn before the castle, and Mr. Wesley stood on the top of a long flight of steps. And if you remember, in the last video we looked at Morrow Domain, and of course that's where the castle originally stood. And he was on the steps actually before the grand entrance hall, and he preached, she says, to the people. And Wesley then was back again in 1760 to MOIRA, where he was apparently a guest of the family at MOIRA House, which was the castle, and he mentions the visit in his journal. Thursday the 1st of May 1760. He says, I rode to MOIRA soon after 12 standing on a tombstone near the church. I called a considerable number of people to know God and Jesus Christ, whom he had sent. We were just opposite to the Earl of MOIRA's house, which is the castle, the best furnished of any I have seen in Ireland. And of course, he goes on here and says, it stands on a hill with a large avenue in front, bounded by the church on the opposite hill. The other three sides are covered with orchards, gardens and woods, in which are walks of various kinds. And so Wesley actually preached near this church here, which is fantastic when you think of it. And there you can see the grave, the front of the graveyard at the front of the church, but there's also the graveyard actually runs around the back as well. And in journal number 12, Wesley writes of a third visit, which was just over a week later on Monday the 12th of May 1760. He says, I have preached to a very civil congregation, and I like what he puts in here, but there is no life in them. So I thought that was very funny. There is no life in them. And Wesley was in the area on several occasions after that during the following years, but there is no record of him ever having preached in MOIRA again. And so as you can see, the graves here at the front, at least anyway, are pretty modern. But where we've just come from then, you can't really see because of the fog, but across the far side then is where we have just come from, and that's where the domain is, and that's where the actual castle was. It must have been tremendous days all the same in those days whenever Wesley was going round the countryside preaching. And to think that the Earl actually rung the bell to get the people to come to hear him, and the people flocked to hear him. And God was really moving in those days, and the people's heart was turned back towards God. And I think we need that again in the days that we're living in today. In fact, we do need it again. We need the people's hearts to be turned back to God. And there you can see the church. You can see the church a bit better now we're up at it. And that's St John's Church of MOIRA. And it was near that church actually that John Wesley preached. You can see a monument there to the war dead just at the front there. You can see that. And so it was at that church then, that near that church on a gravestone, that John Wesley preached to the people. Now, I have been told that there's a marker here to mark the spot. Now, well, I don't see a gravestone here, but it could have been that one at the back, right enough. But that white marker there is supposedly the spot where Wesley preached from, or at least in this area here. So I've been told that this is actually, that pillar there marks the spot, but there's no information on it. It doesn't actually tell you that, but I was told that that actually marks the spot where Wesley preached from. And so there you can see the church. That's St. John's Church in MOIRA, and this is where Wesley preached to the multitudes. He was certainly used of God. In fact, all the Methodist preachers were, weren't there? And there you can see the side of the church. Again, there's another big pillar there. And there's also graves around the back of the church. And so that's St. John's Church in MOIRA, where John Wesley preached to the people. Thanks for listening, and if you enjoy the channel, don't forget to like and also subscribe. God bless.